Now, on the same topic of male feminism and men and what their role is when it comes to gender equality, our second speaker is going to take us through what exactly allyship is and what we mean when we're talking about men coming into the fight for gender equality as allies and not champions. The topic of her speech is more allies, less champions, which is very interesting because this has been a topic that has been very popular, especially in Southern Africa and in Malawi. Should men be allies or should they be champions? Maybe is it the same thing or are these two things different? So our next speaker is Tawonga Msowoya, who is the national coordinator for Pepeta Malawi. Pepeta Malawi is a feminist movement that is advocating for social justice and gender equality in the country, and it is a branch of Pepeta Africa, which is a movement that is in Southern Africa. And she is also an avid and radical feminist who has been in the movement for gender equality for some time now. And now let's listen to Tawonga Msowoya.
So I wanted to talk about male allyship and men's involvement in the movement. And I wanted to focus on the issue of male identities and how that is how men can contribute to the movement and be allies. So I'm pretty sure we're all aware that our world is very systematically unequal. It goes from the way we distribute political power, the way our resources are distributed, the separation between the public and the private, and subsequently leaving women in the private and the domestication of women, and the violence and the brutalization of women's bodies. It's all a matter of inequality. And for the most part, we can say that these inequalities are sustained by and contributed to by, I guess if we look at it in the African setting, there are issues that come from being a post-colonial country. So there's those forces acting on women's identities. But on the other hand, there are forces that are acting on women at the hands of men. So in terms of, I think what contributes to that is how men construct their identities, how we define who a man is, what masculinity is, how men engage with other men. But these are inequalities that are being challenged. The global feminist movement has called attention to so many problems relating to women and women's identities and inequality. And the question now becomes, what is a man's role in this type of movement? How do men support and be part of a global feminist movement? So there are some people who say, no, men can't be part of these movements because they occupy a position of privilege. So they don't know what women experience. They don't know what women's struggles are. So ultimately, they can't champion a movement because there's a lot of things that they're going to miss that they don't know about. And on the other hand, the argument is that men can and should be part of the movement. And simply put, men are part of the problem. Men are part of the problem, so they should be part of the solution. I guess gender injustice can and only will cease when men get involved and help women fight these and lead anti-patriarchal movements. So I think one of the most important things that men can do as allies is scrutinize their identities. So it's the small things that contribute to how men perceive women and ultimately how men are unequal to women. So starting with scrutinizing the male identity and teaching other men. So men occupy a position whereby they could be an obstacle, but they could also be a catalyst in achieving equality. And I think the first part to start would be to unpack what the male gender is. I think for the most part, men are treated as ungendered sort of beings, where gender is something that is the sole concentrate of women, and men are just kind of ungendered. So starting with gendering the male identity, understanding that men are also impacted by gender inequality, and men are active participants in enforcing these unequal systems. So starting there and challenging that identity is another good way for men to be good allies. And I think one of the most important things we discuss is allies over champions. So championship, to me, puts a pedestal, men's involvement on a pedestal of championship, where you are pretty much patting men on the back for doing the bare minimum. Whereas with allies, men will form relationships with the movement and have their own part to play without being in the part where we're celebrating them for doing the bare minimum. So I think there's that danger of we place men's involvement on a pedestal. Male involvement also has another inherent problem where it diminishes the work being done by women, because it ultimately comes with men being patted on the back for being different. and for actually minimizing the space for women. I've seen it a couple of times where men tap into the resources that are there for women and take advantage of them, or they take otherwise resources that could have gone somewhere else to help the women's movement. So there's also that danger of men minimizing the space for women when they come in. But I think just to wrap up, I would say the things that I think an ally should. So I would say an ally should call out other men and challenge negative constructions of masculinity. An ally should create more spaces for conversation around gender inequality. An ally should lead by example in their homes, in their places of work, and in the informal conversations that they have with their friends. And an ally should prioritize the agenda of engaging other men and giving agency. So I think I'm going to wrap up by borrowing the words of Bantu Steve Biko, who said, the most potent weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. So I think the most important thing there is the issue of mindset. So I think that's the biggest obstacle standing in the way of men being involved in gender equality. It's the mindset change. And I think that's the first place to start, continually changing or challenging things, men's identities, and emphasizing mindset change and challenging things that otherwise go unchallenged or unchecked.